Welcome to the third of the BTS Careers Pathways events. I'm Jeff Scholes. I'm one of the directors of Bespoke Training Solutions. So just as a little bit of background about myself, I started my career in financial services back in the 1980s, which feels like a lifetime ago, but yeah, quite a while ago. I was a broker consultant for one of the major providers and found my way into learning and development in the 90s. I'm hosting today's event, and I'm really pleased to have two guests with us today. We have John Batten, who I think I've known John professionally for about 6 years now, something like that. Richard Cooper, I've worked with for the same company. I'm sorry, Richard, I'm going to say the same thing. It was about 20 years ago, I think we first met. So quite a bit of history there. So John is the Learning Propositions Manager at the CII, and Richard is the Business Development Manager at the LIBF. So in a second or two, I'm going to ask my guests to introduce themselves. And then what we're going to do today is talk about the various routes to level 4 and possibly the next steps beyond that. So I think let's get straight into it. John, good morning. First of all, thanks for joining us, John. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role?
Absolutely. Morning, Jeff. Morning, everyone on the call. Nice to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation. As you say, Learning Proposition Manager at the Chartered Insurance Institute. I've been with CII for about 9 months. Prior to that, a long career, a bit like yourself, in learning and development, primarily in financial services. And we got to know each other through my work at the St James's Place wealth management business. So a good grounding in financial planning, wealth management, but also obviously the exams that support that from the CII side. So hopefully it'd be a really useful and enjoyable call for us today.
And just before we move on, John, what's your role within the organisation? I can see your title. Tell me what that means.
So all things learning, really. So we do a lot of work supporting corporate clients with learning solutions. We provide exam training, technical training, and skills training, actually, to a number of large and small corporate clients. I'm working on a project at the moment, which we might touch on a little bit later, to reintroduce our public training offering as well to people like on this call who are looking to pass one of our qualifications. And I also look after what's known as the Assess platform. So some on this call may have access to that through their employer, but we have a large learning management platform full of technical development, CPD content, which falls under my remit as well.
Okay, so you said all things learning and development, you meant it. It's
a broad remit indeed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, John. Richard, I'm going to come over to you now. Same question, a bit about you and a bit about your role.
Yeah, I suppose that the role within the London Institute of Banking and Finance, it's got a grand title actually. It's Business Development Manager, Business Specialist, Professional Education, Financial Services. So I'm more focused on the promotion and development of the financial services exams. So we have our mortgage CMAP, which everybody knows and loves. We have learning provision as well. So we sort of split the business development manager role, and there's two of myself and Gordon. I concentrate really on financial services. I suppose from my past experience, like yourself, Jeff, I started 40 years ago this year, as it would be.
You're more honest about the term than me, Richard. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it was HMRC is where I started my love of all things then sort of taxation and pensions, and then sort of like developed from there. Had a stint in sort of like learning development, where obviously we met Jeff in AXA at the time. And for the last 10 years before I took up this role, I semi-retired basically. And for the last 10 years, I was a chartered financial planner in an IFA. I suppose from that point of view, I have a love of all things exam. I am a fellow with the PFS, so I have loved their exams over the years. And I'm actually working towards fellowship now with the London Institute of Banking and Finance. So I'm taking their exams as well and understanding how they're structured and how they're that little bit different. Again, it's an enjoyable exercise to do things slightly differently to what I've done in the past.
And that's interesting, Richard. You've highlighted a point there that a lot of people will sort of move between one and the other of the routes, and there'll be different times when it meets different needs. And guys, everybody else on the audience, we were talking before you joined about, isn't it interesting? You've got two people from different examining bodies quite happy to come together and talk about their offering on one platform. And I think this is what's great about our industry. There's so many people. LinkedIn's full of it. People trying to help each other. So one last question for you, Richard. Tell me a bit about your role then. What is it you actually do? You had that long title, which I was really impressed with. Thank you. Absolutely. What does that mean?
So the role really, it is about developing and expanding the professionalism of advisors. So taking them on a journey really in their development for those that are new to the industry, as well as those that are already established with the industry. And I think we all have a commitment to how we actually develop that and develop their professionalism and their skills, over a period of time. So really, my role within that is to shout loudly about some of the things that LIBF do.
Right.
In fairness, it is something that we historically, as a learning organisation, we haven't always shouted loudly about some of the things that we do. Not just from a professional qualifications, but also some of the work we do, with sort of in schools with 40,000 students there, sort of like doing our financial capability exams, up to sort of GCSE level. So again, it's something that we do as a charitable organisation that we're sort of committed to. Right. And we also have our university. We have a university in London. It's small, but it is purely focused on developing skills within financial services. So, again, it's things that we don't necessarily shout about, and not a lot of people know that we do. And then I suppose then it's how do we actually then develop that learning? How do we develop those testing processes to make them more relevant to a modern audience? That's right. Things have changed, things are changing. Technology is changing. So how do we actually keep up with that and make it relevant to learners today?
So there's a lot of awareness as part of the role as well. And I think that applies to many of us. The top things we're doing, John's talking about the initiatives over at the CII. I mean, BTS, for it as an example, one of our candidates, I might have mentioned this before, one of our candidates described BTS as the best kept secret in financial services industry, which, it's not really what we're going for. I don't think we're going to have that put as our strapline across our website, but there's a lot of good work going on by a lot of people, and it's about getting it out there. Interesting, I'm going to come to this later on, but both of you touched on skills as well. So it's not just about the professional qualifications. I think that's something we'll come back to later on. Guys, just before I move on, I should really confirm the format of today's event for everybody else. There are lots of insights that I want to get from John and Richard, so I'm going to spend about 25-30 minutes picking their brains and find out as much as we can, asking a series of questions. Then we'll open up the mic probably for the last 10 minutes to give you a chance to ask some questions. So that's the plan of how it will work. One thing I should point out is you've probably heard when you dialed in, the session is being recorded. What will happen is the audio version of the session will be available on the BTS website and various social media platforms. And I just heard, I was very impressed before, we'll be on Spotify, which I loved the sound of. So we'll actually be on Spotify for people to dial in as well. I'm going to start then. BTS tend to focus on the CII exam. So I'm going to start with the route I know more about. So I'm going to ask John, my first question, if you're up for it, John. In a nutshell, what is the CII route to achieving level 4?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so there's actually several routes to achieving level 4. So on the financial planning side, there are 3 primary routes. There's the diploma in regulated financial planning, which is probably the one that most people are familiar with. We'll talk about that some more, I'm sure. There's the diploma in financial planning, and there's also a level 4 certificate in paraplanning. So broadly, there's a great deal of flexibility for people to choose a route that will help them achieve a qualification that's relevant for their career aspirations, their role they're currently doing, or indeed to have their previous qualifications and experience recognised with a level 4 qualification at the end as well. So,
and what does that route look like? I'm going to ask you some questions later on about the exact study journey, but what does that route look like? What it's made up of? If you're trying to summarise in a 30-second, what would you say, John?
So let's use the diploma in regulated financial planning as the example. Yep. 6 examinations, 6 units to complete. 5 of those are multiple choice online exams. One of them is a case study written short answer exam. Case study driven written exam.
Okay. One thing I've looked online, I've looked at your website. I'm never clear on the difference between the regulated and the non-regulated. What's the difference between those two?
It's a really good question. So there is some overlap, and the diploma in regulated financial planning is the standard for anybody looking to give financial advice. The diploma in financial planning is probably most appropriate for people who are either in support roles for financial planning, or possibly they've already got some qualifications and they're looking at those historic qualifications, thinking, how do I gap fill those to get a recognised level 4 qualification?
So I suppose I'm being naive. There's a clue in the name. The regulated is for people operating in a regulated environment. The other people who probably aren't subject to that regulation themselves.
That's a good summary, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John. Richard, I'm going to ask you the same questions. It'll be a bit like table tennis, this, guys. I do apologize. Richard, give me again. Thumbnail sketch route of the route to level 4 with the LIBF.
Okay. So there's 2 level 4 qualifications that we have. We have the Diploma in Financial Advice, which again is a regulated qualification which allows advisors to go on and subsequently advise in a regulated environment. And we also have a Diploma in Paraplanning. So for those paraplanners that perhaps in the future don't want to be advisors, then it's a level 4 qualification that aims to promote and build the skills specifically to paraplanning. So that's the difference. That's the difference of the 2. For both of them, the way that it works is that they're effectively 2 units that you need to follow. The first one is the Financial Services Regulation and Ethics that we all love and try to make as interesting as we can. But it's one of those that is a multiple choice exam, more a little bit later. And then the second one is more around the actual more detailed aspects of the role. So and they're sort of, those units, they're then sort of like tested by way of either coursework and also a formal case study. So a little bit different. Rather than having a series of multiple choice exams, there's a coursework that we involve in ours within a specific time frame that everybody works towards, and then a final, more detailed, comprehensive exam. So we try and make them relevant to the role and make them realistic to the role. I suppose is the ethos in terms of where the LIBF are in terms of how they format that role. So.
And that's interesting, isn't it? We've got 2 routes to level 4, and I'm guessing, I'll get you guys to tell me more later on, that you're encompassing the same competencies, the same knowledges, the same applications, but just taking a different route to it and demonstrating that different along the way. Richard, how flexible is your study path then? If you're going to follow your study path, describe it to me. So I'm thinking of things like, let's assume you've got a candidate who needs to take a break. You mentioned things like case studies, and you've got things like assessments as you go through. What if I've got a candidate that's going to have to take a break for whatever reason, with family or whatever? And is there a time limit for start to finish? Fill out a bit more detail for me.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that you need to do here, whatever route you take, is understanding the route to the qualification. So so what are the requirements you have, and what are the timescales, and how flexible are they? And there are different ways of working this. You can either look to sit the exams at different times. So I suppose apply to do the financial services and ethics one to start with, and then go on and do the second unit. So you can time when you want to go in. That's a bit more expensive going down that route, because you have to pay for them separately rather than the combined unit. But what we normally do is we would look to do the financial services and ethics exam first. That's you've got 12 months to do that, and that, as I say, they're done at either remotely or Pearson VUE test centres at a time to suit you. So you can decide when you want to do those. The second part, the advanced financial advice, as it's called, is more structured. So it has 3 start dates during the year. So you can choose which of the start dates you want to work towards. And if there are issues around that, then we are flexible in sort of like allowing people to move if they haven't started already. If there are those personal issues that come on, and we don't normally allow people to move on to the next one if there are issues.
Right.
And we normally have a working time scale. It's never set in stone, because we like to be as flexible as we can, of 2 years from start to finish. Ideally, from start to finish, if you time it correctly, then to get qualified, you could do that in around 9 months. The study time, I would say, is probably broadly similar, because the qualifications are assessed by outside organisations.
The benchmarks, aren't they, by the regulator, well, the education, the standards regulators.
Absolutely. So to achieve that standard, they have to achieve a certain level. So I would expect that study time would be broadly similar. So I think ours is in total is about 400 hours, and I wouldn't be surprised, if the CII was any different to that, because that's the expected study for somebody to achieve that level of capability, skill, to be able to then subsequently go on and advise. So we like to have that element of flexibility, and I suppose we're quite we're quite used to being able to talk to learners on a sort of like one-to-one basis and be as flexible as we can. We have that, I suppose we have that luxury because of the of the numbers that come through, as it's not as huge as what goes through the CII, so we can be more bespoke and more flexible in what we do.
Okay, a couple of points then. I wonder how much of that relates to you then, John, when you were talking about the flexibility, the study path. Yours a flexible route? Would you agree with Richard that you do the regulation first and get it out of the way as quickly as possible? Because we all know and love regulation. Is that the view? Let's get that one done.
R01 gets a lot of knocking, doesn't it? But yeah, it's regulation and ethics. It's important, and it's
absolutely
quite dry.
None of us
but yeah, it's pretty manageable, I think, for most candidates at the same time. But it is a bit of a slog. Yeah, flexibility, absolutely. I think. Ultimately, we try and put a lot of flexibility into the hands of the candidate. So our units are all available to sit online, with huge amounts of variety of choice of where, what timescale you put between them. You can set your own pace ultimately. So, as Richard said, it's a hefty commitment of time to get to the full level 4 diploma, 300 plus hours. I've known people who've done that.
Hours you're talking as well. There's a lot, but as Richard quite rightly said, you're aiming towards a level 4 qualification, so there's going to be a lot of similarities.
Yeah, and my advice would be simply to factor that into your sort of schedule. If you are, like most of us, busy, hardworking with other commitments, family life, and so on, a couple of years is a very realistic expectation. I've known people who've done it in 3 months, possibly even less, but that's essentially a full-time job, with lots of support. So 50, 60 hours, maybe 100 hours for some of the more involved units.
And would you talk about this particular order? I know at BTS we've got our own preferred order when we're talking about the CA exams that we feel works. Are we going against your guidance? What do you think, John?
Well, I don't think there is a set order, and actually there's a lot of good advice out there, in particular from people like yourselves, Jeff, at BTS. I think I would encourage anybody to think about not just their interest in the topics, but how it's going to make them feel to get a couple of exams under their belt. So I know a lot of people like to get R01 done and out of the way. It's challenging in terms of its level of interest for some people, but it's not particularly technically challenging. So it's achievable, the R05, the financial protection exam as well, is another good qualification to get under your belt. Within the CII Diploma in Regulated Financial Planning, the R05 exam is probably the easiest, I think it's fair to say. It's a level 3 qualification, which forms part of the overall wider level 4 qualification as a whole. So you might want to think about doing R05, R01 as the first 2 on your list. So when you come to tackle the investments and tax and pensions units, you've got a little bit more confidence perhaps to build on.
Yeah, so you've got some flexibility, and it also depends on your background as well. I've had people that have come to BTS and say, I've been a tax accountant for X number of years. Maybe you think about moving that one to the front, and we have those conversations. I guess you have similar conversations as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about timescale? Richard mentioned a timescale. What would you view as the timescale to achieve a level 4 diploma?
So it completely varies depending on the situation and the individual. As I say, some people have managed to crack that in about 3 months. It usually would take most of us a couple of years or so.
What's the average, John? What do you say from your experience?
I don't have a hard and fast average, but I kind of look at my own experience and sort of think, well, if I was doing a few hours a week around my working day, if I know it's going to be 60 hours or so minimum to be confident, it's going to take me several weeks, 10 weeks, something like that, to fit that in. So yeah, it would take me quite a while to get through all of them.
So interesting, you've talked. I mean, we've been focusing on the level 4 as we absolutely should. Probably a good sort of strange point. I don't want to come back to the exams in a second. What about level 6, John? What would be happen for level 6 for you guys? So
level 6 is how we would encourage people to get to their chartered status, and in essence, it's as you'd expect, continued study, further units, and an accumulation of more credits. So our units all carry a prescribed number of credits, which is points make prizes. That's that sort of approach.
Yep.
So to achieve a level 6 qualification, you'd need 290 credits in total. And I think, just checking my notes here, 120 of those would need to be from those level 6 exam units.
So you take some from the AF, some from the JOs, and
exactly
manage them together for whatever your role is going to be. Because we talk sometimes about the double bubble effect, that some of the JO exams fit really well. So the trust exams fits very well with the taxation trust advanced exam. We talk about that. So I guess there's a few of those things going on.
Yeah, very much so. It's always worth keeping an eye out. If your aspiration is to get to level 6 one day, seek advice and kind of look at the information available to figure out what the connections are. I know I picked up my AF4 exam in exactly that way. So, whilst studying for the relevant JO, I was able to do the same exam. It was a tough couple of days sitting them back to back, but it paid off with AF4 certainly.
And I must admit, from my perspective, I need to do that because whether it's my age and nobody step in there, but sometimes knowledge fade happens to me really quickly. So if I've just passed a qualification that's similar, let's crack on with the next one while at least it's still in there and fresh.
It's good use of your time. And if you put it off, like you say, if you put it off for 6 or 12 and 18 months while you do other things, you've got a lower base to start from again, haven't you?
Yeah, you now know how to build an outside kitchen, but it hasn't really helped with your AF exam. So yeah, or whatever it happens to be. That's enough about me. Richard, what about you in terms of level 6? What's your journey look like?
Yeah, I suppose level 6 for us is something that's really developing at the moment, and we're able to take on some of that experience that we've got in from the higher education connections that we have, obviously with the university, and some of the skills and understanding of examination techniques that we're now able to bring into our level 6, which makes them a little bit different, a little bit more innovative in the way we actually undertake the examinations. We have basically 2 mandatory units. We have as you said, taxation and trusts normally link quite well together. So we have a taxation and trust mandatory units and a managing investments mandatory unit. And they're assessed in different ways. I'll come on to some of the I can't even use the word, new ways that we're doing things. And then you have the choice of either doing some of our other optional internal examinations or some external ones as well, where again, some more skills-based examinations which external exam organizations undertake, and we allow them to count towards our level 6 and ultimately chartered. So pension transfers used to be a very popular one, but obviously due to the restrictions of pension transfers, that sort of like diminished recently. So our new financial planning in retirement is one has really taken off because it looks very holistically at that retirement and later life planning.
Right.
And this is where examination techniques are changing. So it's not just about a formal exam as such. Some of the exams are undertaken by way of forums. So how can you get consensus? What's your skill of having conversations within a group of people is one part of the assessments. A video assessment in terms of a case study, being able to dissect a case study and come up with a solution. Wow. And then having a video assessment that then says, how can you actually put that solution together as a summary towards a client? So what's your capability? We're not assessing your presentation skills, but your ability to dissect something and make a summary that's understandable and relevant based on that case study. And then ultimately,
Richard, you've got a lot of skills stuff going in there, because you mentioned that before as well, that skills is a key thing, and that's starting to feel like a difference at the level 4. John, what's your view on skills development? Because I know the R06 is actually assessing somebody's skills, but in a written environment. So tell me a bit more about your approach to skills.
Yeah, I think in the context of what we're talking about today, I'm absolutely right. We're keen, as you'd appreciate, to test knowledge and application of that knowledge and skills in interpreting case studies primarily, but client scenarios, interpreting that, applying technical knowledge and providing advice ultimately. So R06 and AF5, the level 6 kind of equivalent, would be the obvious place for us to test that.
Okay. So, I mean, you both talked about knowledge, you both talked about skills. A question to 2 of you, and one of you leap in first. Who tends to take your qualification? So have you got a target market, a particular customer that said, the CI route fits that profile, the LIB? Does that exist or not? By whoever wants to answer that first, by all means, leap in.
The answer to that is no.
Okay.
There's not necessarily a target market, and I would say for any learner or anybody that's new, and wants to take the route to becoming a regulated financial advisor, it's to do a bit of research first, to actually have a look at what that route looks like and what the examination process looks like. Because different people learn in different ways. Different people also are, when it comes to examinations, are better from our experience at either doing case studies or doing multiple choice exams. So what actually suits, what's more suitable for the individual is the most important thing. And then it's looking to say, whichever route I go, what additional support's available. So for some individuals, they might need external, more structured learning rather than just self-managed or self-studied revision. So what support's available, either from learning partners, from the organisation itself, or by trusted learning partners as well. So for the individual, it's all about what's the right route for me. Where we find that a lot of people now sort of see our route, because it's more, I suppose, coursework, case study based, it's very similar to some of the things that are now sort of like undertaken in higher education and further education. So that exam route becomes sort of like, oh yes, I'm used to doing it that way, and it sort of like seems to fit that. But there's no right or wrong way, and there's and
that's not the point of today's call, is it? That's not saying, it's not a battle between the two of you guys, right, Rich?
Oh, not at all. It's what's right for the learner, ultimately what's right for the learner, and also for the organizations that you're actually working with. It's what's right for those, and how does it fit into their structures as well. So
I'm going to ask the same thing of John in a minute, but one thing I've noticed is what we tend to see quite often is, Richard, we met at one of the paraplanner events recently, and we're talking to lots of paraplanners, and by the way, the knowledge of those guys frightened me to death, for the knowledge that these paraplanners have. But we were talking about the various routes that people had followed, and people seem to, whatever route they follow, they almost became emotionally attached to. It was, I've chosen a path and this feels right for me. And there was almost like, not camp. Yeah, let's use that. There were different camps in the room going, this one's best because I love it. But this one's best because I love it. And it seems to be a very personal choice. John, is there a pattern from your perspective that you see as the type of role, the type of individual that would choose the CII route?
I don't think it's really that possible to generalize. It suits, as Richard said, really, it suits lots of different people. And people take our qualifications with an aspiration to get into the industry, or they've been in the industry for 30 years and they're looking to broaden their skill set, so a real variety of people take our qualifications. For me, I'm kind of echoing what you've said, Richard. I think it's about choice and about doing some research to understand what is going to be right for you. I'd encourage anybody to think about their long-term aspirations. And this touches on something, Jeff, I think you mentioned earlier. If you do aspire to reach a level 6 chartered status or become a fellow of the Chartered Insurance Institute, or even if you're not sure yet, but you might do one day, it might guide your thinking to follow one path rather than the other. I guess if that is part of your strategy, picking up qualifications from different auditing bodies might not necessarily get you that badge of honour in the future as efficiently. But that I suspect that's a fairly minor consideration for many people.
And I think, guys, what you've illustrated, and not without intention, I'm not saying this, you're saying it was almost a daft question. And actually, there isn't one route for a certain type of person. It's analysing what feels right for you in terms of the style, etc. You've talked about moving from level 6 and beyond. I'm just looking at the clock, because in theory, I've got 1 minute before Alex will shout at me and say, you need to open the mic to everybody else. I've got one question, and guys, I don't know if you'll answer this for me, but I'm interested in knowing what development or what direction the two organisations are going in. So is there anything coming up in the future that's of interest and that you might want to share? So Richard, I'm going to come straight back to you. Is there anything happening at the LIBF that you can tell us? And we promise we won't tell anybody else. This is our secret. Is there anything that's happening that you want to share?
The only one thing I will share is that we're going through a process at the moment of as we always do, of how do we improve the learner experience, and how do you improve the examination process. So we a lot of our work is done online via Brightspace. A lot of it's online learning. So how do we actually improve that learning with the individual? So how do we make it more relevant? How do you make that learning more enjoyable as a journey? And that's that's an ongoing process that we're looking to, I would say, look to improve. And part of that is the feedback that we get. So we value any any constructive feedback that we get as a result of our courses and learning. So the only way that we can improve is that, when you get a questionnaire about your experiences, is be honest, be open about what you've actually enjoyed, what you haven't enjoyed, and how we can improve things. So I would say that's that's something that over the next sort of couple of years, not in our level 4, but also in our level 6, is how do we make it more relevant to the industry as the profession again continues to develop, with some of the things that we'll be seeing over the next 2 years in regulation changes, consumer duty of care, and obviously a drive to net zero. So what are the major changes that we're going to need to bring in and make it more relevant and more understandable for the learner.
And I think that's a lesson for all of us, whether it's an examining body, whether it's a provider like ourselves. You need to be looking at yourselves and saying, you're constantly looking at what should we do differently, and what could we evolve. John, is there anything you can share with us?
Again, it's challenging to be specific, isn't it? There's lots in the pipeline, as you can imagine. The CII
in those secret boardrooms at the CII, John. Go on, tell me.
Right, they don't let me into those, but there's lots going on, as you'd imagine, and we're always keen to make sure that our qualifications are as accessible and relevant and meaningful to our members as you'd expect. We undertook a large consultation exercise last year, and we're digesting and working through the feedback from that. So look out for the sort of published learnings from that coming soon. That will inform a little bit more, but suffice to say, we're looking at different assessment methods, so how we support members in different ways with development that isn't necessarily qualifications orientated, but relevant to the challenges of the role, that sort of thing. And I mentioned at the top of this call, one thing that I'm keen to see us do is re-enter the market for directly supporting members and customers with access to exam revision support as well. So that will be hopefully announcing details of that later in the summer.
Sounds exciting from both parties, or for both bodies. Right, gents, thank you both. That's the things that I wanted to ask you specifically. There's a few things. I think we've introduced a few new things as we're going on. There's loads of other things that I could ask, but I'm not going to, looking at the time. So we've got 10 minutes or so left. Can we open up the mic to audience questions? And guys, there's no silly questions. Talk to these guys while you've got them. It's a great opportunity. And what I would say, when we finished, John and Richard, I'm going to say, in terms of if people have got more questions of you, what's the best way of asking you later on? But for now, in the open forum, has anybody got any questions? I'll keep quiet while we open up the mic for a second.
Hello, I'm currently going down the CII route, the regulated financial planning route. The only sort of question I've got really is just sort of along the lines of, I know, really for John, I know there's been a recent sort of survey from members as to sort of feedback, if you like. And one kind of feedback I did have in particular, just sort of working towards these exams, is that sometimes my only sort of frustration with them sometimes has been it sort of sometimes felt like a bit of a memory test. And I know that there's been sort of off the back of feedback some suggestion around possibly, amending the exam so that they're more sort of focusing on your application as opposed to how good your memory is, basically. So I was just sort of intrigued by that, really, and just sort of curious to know sort of, is that going to be brought forward because, and looked at potentially, because that's something that would greatly aid me in my sort of whole process with these exams and just enjoying them, essentially. So yeah, I'd just be intrigued to know just sort of what was going on with that and whether that is something that's going to be looked at.
Yeah. That's great. Lawrence, thank you for asking the question, first of all. Sorry, Jeff.
I was going to say, before you answer, John, one thing I would say is we get a lot of feedback from people who are sitting the exams, and what they say is, flipping heck, it was really asking me to apply my knowledge. So it's interesting that Lawrence's perspective is slightly different, whereas other people are saying, I knew it, but I had to apply it in the exam. So it's interesting. Fire away, John.
Yeah, it's a really valid question, Lawrence, and we have heard that feedback on a number of occasions. So it's something we are actively looking at. And when I sort of mentioned assessment methods in my outline of what future things we're looking at, that's part of that debate, really. Case studies and coursework are two ways that we could look to expand or evolve our approach to examinations. And as you appreciate, a timed multi-choice exam is one assessment method. It's quite a traditional assessment method And I understand why you would say that feels like a knowledge test or a memory test. We do try and write those questions in a way that mean you have to think about it rather than just remember a number correctly.
Sure.
John, I would say I just sat R02 a while ago and I had to think about it. So there's some I had to think.
Yeah, well, I would hope there's a decent balance in there. Sometimes, you do need to remember the rate of tax on something, and that's just a number memory test question, isn't it? But it's a fairly basic test. But we're actively looking at different assessment methods, Lawrence.
Okay.
As soon as there's anything we can share on that, we absolutely will.
Okay, thank you.
So Richard and John, in terms of people with further questions, Richard, what's the best route for people coming to you? Is it via BTS? Is it directly to you? What works best for you?
That just come directly to me. If you look at me up on LinkedIn, in terms of Richard Cooper or Rich Cooper at London Institute of Banking and Finance, you've got my contact details in there. But it's very straightforward. It's rcooper at libf.ac.uk. But yeah, just get in touch. I'm always available to talk to people and just talk through those options if they want to know more. So.
Okay, thank you, Richard. And BTS apologises in advance if your LinkedIn inbox ends up completely full as a result of that. So
no, that's fine. That's what it's there for. Again, as I said before, it's about promoting and developing what we do and shouting about it. And that's what my role is. So okay. As I say, I only work sort of 2.5 days a week as I'm semi-retired. So
stop showing off, Richard.
I know. I thought I'd get that one back in again, but this is a way of ensuring that I can give something back to a profession that's been very, very successful for me over the years. And that's why I always say there's no question that you can't ask, because I just want to help people get through and develop themselves a really good career in financial services. Because
I've heard you say that lots of times.
Very rewarding.
So thank you. John, what about contacting you? What's the best way to find out more information?
Yeah, I would say the same as Rich. I'm always happy to connect directly or on LinkedIn. john.batten@ci.co.uk is my email address. We have a training mailbox if you want a generic response, training@ci.co.uk. And equally, our customer services team are really well placed. I've not got their phone number handy, but you can call them or you can email them. Just go via the website for those details. And they can certainly, support with any advice or questions about which qualification next, or what does it cost, or how to enroll. So feel free to get in touch with whichever way suits best.
Okay, thank you, guys. Looking at my clock again, we're starting to run out of time. First, like I said, gents, thank you very much indeed for opening up, sharing the insights into the different routes. Sure, there's loads of other stuff we could talk about. I'm intrigued about the level 6, about each one. So Rich and John, I might be coming back to you talking about that at some point. One thing I'll mention to everybody, I think, as I mentioned, this session has been recorded. It's going to be available as a podcast. There is actually another Pathways event. Our next Pathways event, let me check the date, is on Wednesday, the 8th of June. And what we're going to be doing then is talking to successful power planners and the route that they've followed. And again, I think we'll find John and Rich that they'll have followed the different routes to their relative successes. So thank you, everybody. We're going to draw the call to a close. I'll draw the event to a close. Be available soon to listen to. Thanks again.